Ray Harmon here, and today on the Hack Music Theory Show, how to grab and hold the attention of your listeners through the verses of your songs. But first, G. Verses are the sections of our songs where we're totally free to develop the narrative. In other words, verses are the channels through which most of the story is going to unfold in every song. Now, most songwriters know this when it comes to the lyrics, which is why you'll hear different lyrics in verse 1 to verse 2 in pretty much every song. However, when it comes to the music, when you compare verse 1 to verse 2 in pretty much every song, you're going to notice that the chord progressions and melodies are exactly the same. Not only does this potentially lead to friction in the verses between the lyrics and the music, because if your lyrical narrative is developing while your musical narrative is stagnating, that's going to create friction, but also this can lead to a second verse that's kind of boring because there's nothing musically new in there. So if your lyrics in verse 1 and verse 2 are about the same thing, just from a different angle or whatever, then great, use the same chords and melodies in both verses. But if your lyrics have developed from verse 1 to verse 2, then here's an awesome hack to allow your music to also develop from verse 1 to verse 2. Alright, let's jump into our example now. So our tempo here is 90 BPM and the mode we're using is D Dorian. So that's just all the white notes with D as the root. And we've got a 4-bar chord progression here, and the chords are D minor, F major, C major, and G major. And you'll notice a couple of the chords have been inverted, so that just means the notes are being rearranged. And the reason we've done that is to make the chord changes flow nice and smoothly. So you'll see we've inverted the F major, and the reason we rearranged the notes is in order to get the common notes in the same place within the chords as they change. So this is actually F major slash C, because C is the lowest note in the chord and we call that lowest note the bass note. Then the other chord that's been inverted is the G major, and that's been inverted twice actually. The first one we've got G major slash B, because B is the bass note, so the lowest note in the chord. And then we have G major slash D, because D is the bass note. Okay, and just before I play this to you, I want to put this chord progression in context. So this is actually the second verse from our new single, I's Love For You. And the reason we chose the Dorian mode to write our second verse is because we wanted that bright optimism while still having that serious minor at the core. Alright, and here it is.
Join hands, yours eternally, celebrate, this is a happy moment.
So as you can hear, that second verse is a real celebration, and we created that by pushing the limits of how happy a minor mode can be. We did this in two ways. Firstly, we used the Dorian mode, which is obviously the hopeful, optimistic minor mode anyway. But secondly, what we did is we had a huge ratio of major chords to one lonely minor chord. So this D minor is the only minor chord, that's the root minor chord obviously, and it's the only one in the whole chord progression. So that's 25% minor and 75% major, because that's F major, C major, and G major. So we've got a massive 75% major chords versus 25% minor chord, which makes this a very, very happy minor verse. Alright, now on to verse 1, the prequel. So our story starts in a sad place, but while we didn't want to lose that Dorian light at the end of the tunnel, we did want to create more dissonance within that tunnel. So here's what we did. We changed this C major chord into a C minor chord, and we did this by taking its third note, E, and moving it down one semitone to E flat, and that makes it a C minor chord. So we've got C, E flat, G. So with this one tiny one semitone change, we've actually done two massive things. Firstly, we have created major minor balance in our chord progression, because now we have a minor chord here, that's C minor, and we have that D minor root chord. So that's 50% minor, and then we've got here 50% major. So that's the F major and the G major. So that one tiny tweak has now balanced out the major and minor ratio of our chord progression. But most importantly, that one tiny tweak has actually given us a note and a chord that is not in D Dorian. So now you're probably thinking, well, if we're not in D Dorian, what are we in? And that's a great question, and there's a super easy way to work it out. All we do is look at the note we moved, which was E, and E was the second note in D Dorian because it goes D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So we took the second note of D Dorian and we moved it one semitone down. Whenever you move something one semitone down, that's called flattening it. So we took the 2 and we flattened the 2, which now gives us a flat 2. So the new scale that we are in is Dorian flat 2. There's also an alternative way to analyze this E flat, and that is to consider it a non-diatonic or chromatic note, and those are just fancy terms for a note that is not in the scale. And if we used that method of analyzing, that would mean that we would consider this C minor chord a non-diatonic chord because that chord is not found in D Dorian. We chose to approach this as a new scale because we took that new scale and we actually wrote an intro which really highlighted that Dorian flat 2 sound, and then that went into our first verse. And on that note, here's the first verse, and as it plays through, have a listen to the massive difference that this one note that we changed makes to the whole chord progression. Check it out, here we go.
Imprisoned in agony, solitude, my sentence.
So there you go, that is my hack for developing the musical narrative through your verses as your song's story unfolds. It really is that simple. Just write a chord progression for your verse, and then in the next verse, play around with changing a minor chord into a major chord or a major chord into a minor chord to keep the music developing along with the lyrical narrative. Lastly, if you need some help with understanding the modes or how to write great chord progressions and melodies, then please check out my songwriting and producing PDF. And if you want to learn how we write our own songs from start to finish, then please check out our exciting new Patreon project. Both the links are below. Oh, and if you liked the sound of our new single, Eyes Love For You, you can download it for free. The link's below as well. It's only out next Friday, but you can have it now because we like you.
Join